I mean, you get nervous here and there when it's going, I don't want to say easy, but when the score is in your favor, it's like you have to be cautious. So a little bit nervous, but obviously I'm super happy to be here.
The 10,000 Filipino fans didn't just show up to watch tennis. They showed up to make history. And without throwing a single ball, they did something nobody on that court expected. Karolína Muchová, fresh off winning the Qatar Open just weeks before Miami, walked onto the Hard Rock Stadium grandstand court as the clear favorite. World number 14 against world number 29. Experience against youth. Czech precision against Filipino heart. She had beaten Eala 6-0, 6-2 in exactly 60 minutes. A scoreline so brutal it could have silenced any crowd. But this wasn't any crowd. What happened after that final point, when Muchová stood there racket in hand, surrounded by thousands of devastated but still cheering Filipino supporters, genuinely made her feel something she hadn't expected walking onto that court. And in her post-match interview, she couldn't hide it. Alexandra Eala had already lost, but her fans, they somehow won the room. If moments like this fascinate you, subscribe right now because we find the angles everyone else misses. So, what exactly did 10,000 Filipino fans do that made Muchová care? Let's start with what Muchová actually said, because her words, chosen carefully in that post-match interview, tell you everything about the weight of the room she had just competed in. It's honestly not that easy. Even when you keep winning points, you still have thoughts that you have to stay focused, keep pressuring the other player, and all that. Read that again slowly. This is a woman who just won 6-0, 6-2. She didn't drop a single service game. She converted every break point she had, all 5 of them. She fired 20 winners against 11 unforced errors. By every statistical measure, that was one of the cleanest performances of her season. And she's standing there telling the Tennis Channel interviewer that it wasn't easy.
Why?
Because of the stands. Because of what was happening in those stands from the first ball to the last. Here's the detail that separates this crowd from every other crowd in tennis right now. Most partisan fan groups go quiet when their player gets bageled in 22 minutes. They shift in their seats. They look at the scoreboard with that particular face. The one that says, "We might be watching something painful." Not these fans. When she lost the first set 6-0, the Filipino fans didn't flinch. When Muchová broke immediately in the second set and raced to a 4-0 lead, threatening a double bagel that would have been Eala's first in 4 years, the chants didn't stop. Laban Alex, fight Alex. Over and over from the stands packed with Philippine flags, fan club shirts, and supporters who had traveled specifically to Miami to be in that building. When she finally held serve to get on the board at 0-4 in the second set, she let out a roar. The crowd exploded. For a moment, it felt like she had won a Grand Slam title rather than avoided complete embarrassment in a match she was clearly losing. That is the power of what those fans brought into the Hard Rock Stadium grandstand that evening. And Muchová felt every second of it. She later admitted that even with the score heavily in her favor, she had to constantly remind herself to stay focused, to keep the pressure on, to not let the atmosphere disrupt her rhythm. A player of her caliber, a 2023 French Open finalist, a 2-time US Open semi-finalist, having to mentally manage a crowd's energy while winning convincingly tells you something about the sheer force of what those Filipino supporters put into that court. To understand why this moment hit Muchová the way it did, you need to understand who Alexandra Eala actually is to the Philippine sporting community.
Alexandra Eala takes center stage at the BNP Paribas Tennis Paradise in Indian Wells.
It's been packed for players like Alexandra Eala, Joao Fonseca, seeing the Filipino fans, the Brazilian fans.
And why this crowd was never going to behave like a typical tennis audience. Eala is 20 years old. She grew up in Quezon City, moved to Spain at 13 to train at the Rafael Nadal Academy, and spent years quietly building her game while her country waited. The Philippines is a nation where basketball and boxing dominate the sports conversation. Tennis was niche. Tennis didn't produce global stars. And then Eala happened at the 2025 Miami Open. She walked in as a wild card, ranked 140th in the world, and eliminated 3 Grand Slam champions, Jelena Ostapenko, Madison Keys, and Iga Swiatek back-to-back in straight sets, reaching the semifinals as the first Filipino in WTA 1000 history to get that far. That run didn't just change her ranking, it changed the relationship between an entire nation and a sport. By the time the 2026 Miami Open arrived, Eala was ranked number 29, a career high, and her fans had become something the WTA had genuinely never seen before. At the 2026 Australian Open just 2 months earlier, spectators packed her court to capacity and hundreds were turned away at the gate. Her opponent, Alicia Parks, admitted openly that the crowd rattled her so badly in the first set that she lost it 6-0. Tennis forums, broadcast commentators, and fellow players all started using the same phrase. The Filipino fans had turned neutral venues into home courts for Eala wherever she played in the world. Miami was different only because of the size. Hard Rock Stadium has the capacity for it. And the Filipino-American community in South Florida, one of the largest in the United States, showed up in numbers that made this feel less like a tennis match and more like a national event. Now, here's where the story takes the turn that specifically got to Muchová. Eala lost badly. The Czech curse, that's what Philippine sports media had started calling it, extended to a brutal 0-13. 13 matches against Czech players since turning professional in 2020. 0 wins, not 1. And this wasn't a close loss that could be explained away. This was a masterclass from Muchová, the kind of performance where the gap in experience and tactical precision was simply too large to bridge on that particular night. Eala herself didn't hide from it. In her post-match press conference, she was direct and composed. I definitely did not play my best, but that's also a big part because of how she played. There are some details I could have done better. No excuses about the injury wrap on her left thigh. No deflection. Just honest self-assessment from a 20-year-old who had just been taken apart on the court where she had made her name 12 months earlier. And then she spoke in Tagalog to her fans watching back home. Translation: I remain happy and not disappointed. Thank you very much, fellow Filipinos. The fight continues, and I hope to see you again in Europe. That message, delivered minutes after a 6-0, 6-2 loss, landed differently in those stands than you might expect. There were no boos, no visible frustration directed at Eala. Instead, the crowd responded with sustained applause that reportedly continued well after she had left the court. And that is the precise moment the narrative shifted from a match result to something far more human. Muchová was still on court. She heard it. Let's be precise here because this story deserves accuracy rather than exaggeration. Muchová did not collapse in tears at the net. What happened was subtler, and in many ways more telling. In her on-court interview immediately after the match, she visibly struggled to articulate what the experience had felt like. She described feeling nervous despite winning comfortably. She talked about the difficulty of maintaining focus when the emotional atmosphere around her was that intense. And when she acknowledged the crowd, the Filipino fans who had just watched their player lose and were still there, still vocal, still pouring support into the building, there was a visible emotional shift in her composure. This is a player who has cried on court before. At the 2025 US Open, Muchová was visibly emotional mid-match when she spotted her ex-boyfriend in the crowd. She has never been someone who hides what she feels. So when this crowd, not her crowd, not cheering for her, having just watched their player get defeated, moved her to that kind of visible emotional response, it said something significant about what kind of energy those fans carry. There is a specific kind of sportsmanship that transcends rivalry. Cheering your player through a humiliating scoreline without turning ugly, without creating an atmosphere that embarrasses anyone, and then sustaining that support with grace after the loss, that is genuinely rare in sport. Muchová recognized it, and it got to her. What this moment represents goes beyond one match. Eala is scheduled to begin her clay season at the Linz Open in Austria from April 6th, a WTA 500 event, and her first time competing at that level on clay. The ranking damage from Miami is real. She drops approximately 270 points and falls from number 29 toward the mid-40s because she couldn't defend the 390 points she earned from last year's semi-final run. But the cultural story is accelerating in the opposite direction entirely. The WTA officially launched the Philippine Women's Open in January 2026, the country's first WTA tournament driven directly by the surge in interest that Eala created. Tickets to the final sold out before she had even confirmed her participation. Coco Gauff, who defeated Eala in Dubai earlier this year, addressed the pro-Eala crowd after their match and acknowledged their presence. Specifically, opponents are noticing. Tournament directors are noticing. The WTA itself is noticing. The 10,000 Filipino fans in Miami didn't just support their player through a loss. They demonstrated in front of one of the best players in the world what unconditional sporting loyalty actually looks like. Muchová won the match. The fans won something else entirely. And the Czech player, standing across the net from all of that warmth and collective heartbreak, couldn't pretend otherwise. Alexandra Eala lost 60 minutes of tennis. But she left Miami with something that no ranking point captures, the proof that her fans have become a force that the entire tennis world is now watching. And that force, it made Muchová cry. That is exactly why moments like this are worth slowing down for, because the scoreline only ever tells you half the story. If you want the other half every single week, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a video, and drop a comment below telling us, do you think Eala finally breaks the Czech curse in 2026? We read every single one.